There's a debate raging in the media about Ofsted at the moment, sparked by the tragic death of Reading head teacher Ruth Perry, who took her own life while waiting for the release of an Ofsted report which downgraded her school. This week, we're discussing Ofsted and asking if it's fit for purpose. Are inspections an effective tool for improving teaching standards, or are they simply a form of torture for teachers? Can a school really be judged in the space of 2 days? And are one-word judgments helpful for parents, pupils, or teachers?
And of course, it's not just us. We're joined by Graham Tyrer. Graham worked in education for 38 years. He was a head teacher in 2 different secondary schools for 10 years. And Graham worked as an OFSTED Inspector and HMI until 2020. It's worth adding here that all his views in this podcast are completely personal. They don't represent the policies of any organisation. He's here as our friend and our guest. Welcome, Graham.
Hello, thank you very much for asking me. I would join you, first of all, in recognising the tragedy that occurred to Ruth and her family, and so on, and all of the sadness and sorrow that is around all of that. It's of course a horrible human tragedy.
Yeah, of course. And if anyone is feeling overwhelmed by anything that comes to teaching, it happens to us all, please do reach out and find the help that you need. There's lots of links in our bio about where you can get the help you need.
Yeah, and I must say I was an ASCL member for when I was a head teacher, and during the many Ofsteds that I was part of as a head teacher, I can't rate ASCL as a support too highly. They were absolutely fantastic, and their helpline right through. I can't say I called the helpline immediately on learning we were going to be Ofsteded, but pretty quickly afterwards. And they were great for talking me through it, and reassuring me and downplay. A lot of head teachers are catastrophizers, and
yes, absolutely, I can imagine.
And I certainly was, and so you immediately think the worst.
So what made you transition from head teacher to Ofsted? Did you find that becoming an inspector changed your mind on some of the issues that you thought of a head teacher, or?
I think I'd had enough of being a head teacher. I was inspecting while I was a head teacher as a serving, practitioner inspector. As what I think was then called an additional inspector. And then partly, I think at a very base level, curiosity, if I'm totally honest with you. Yeah. What is this like to be an inspector? And so partly that. Of course, there is a nobility of reason, I suppose. The reason why anybody goes into any career has at some level to be altruistic, otherwise how can you look your face in the mirror? You have to believe you're doing a good job, or you have to believe that you want to do a good job. I have to say, as you imply, moving from head teacher, which is patently and obviously service, although not all my colleagues would have agreed with me, I don't think. And actually the role of being a head teacher and inspector is very similar, as I learned. And one of the things that we used to get told on training for MPQH and so on is that occasionally it's not bad to see yourself as an inspector in residence, because you have to involve yourself in the school with the same way that Ofsted do, without fear or favour. You have to be the advocate for the child. But it would be slightly foolish, I think, and incredible to say that a decision to move over into the inspectorate full time was wholly and completely altruistic. I don't think any inspector would say that. Most inspectors, if I'm totally honest, we like the sound of our own voices, and we believe we have something to say. We believe we have a view about education, and if that view aligns with the state's view of education as defined by law, essentially, because Ofsted only seek to implement the various education acts, and if that aligns and you're taken on, then you do feel like you're contributing. You do feel that. You really do feel that, actually. I'll come on to that more later if you wish. But so curiosity and genuinely a sense of, well, could I be of any use?
It's your own time you're wasting. Ramblings from Beyond the Classroom with Marie and Jodie.
everybody in schools who works in schools in any capacity, I think, you do form views as you are in the school, don't you? I think, well, I do anyway. You kind of think, gosh, that's fantastic. If you stumble across something that's just amazing in practice, in terms of what a child happens to have learned, and you think, oh my goodness, that's incredible. How did she do that? And you also, conversely, don't you, when you're in a school, you can't help it, can you? Because if you've got a passion for education, as all of us do, you can't help it. If you see something in a school and you think, oh my Lord, what's happening there? Be it safeguarding, or be it, tragically slow progress when you just know it could be different. You can't help it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All of us have that.
We're never going to get rid of the variability in schools, I don't think, are we?
No. And the variability is often between classroom and classroom. It can be as huge. Absolutely. It can be. I found it can be bigger in the department, in an English department. One teacher next to the other teacher, one teacher's less practice can be just breathtaking, and next door, rather more like me, a bit mundane, a bit dull.
It's hard to keep it all singing, all dancing, though, all the time, isn't it?
Oh, impossible. Impossible. You can't. And if you do try to do that, you do yourself in.
Yeah.
You have to. One of the things I most used to say to myself and used to say to people in schools is just be good enough. Just be good enough. That's you need to be. You need to be good. You need to try, of course.
Yeah.
Anyway, I found the most rewarding thing as an inspector, and it sounds a bit, pious, but it's true, was when a teacher would come for their feedback. Because that's the coal face, isn't it? That's where the rubber hits the road, as it were. And where a teacher has been dreading the whole experience ever since the head teacher has stood up in the staff room to say, hello everybody, well tomorrow we've got inspectors in, and you just know, because I know, I've been there, your heart sinks into your boots. Almost nobody, if they're lying if they say hurrah, no one feels that. The good teachers in the school think, oh my Lord, this matters. They're the good teachers. They're the best teachers. The ones who don't care, who say, "Oh, who cares? Who cares?" They can say they're either lying or they're potentially not very helpful to the organisation because they just don't care. And there are not many of those, but there are some, because every organisation is about normal bell curve, isn't it? And we've got people at the one end who are thinking, "Oh God, when's it home time?" And I don't want to be here, and I hate this job. And others who are just spectacular and will not ever go home and burn themselves out.
As an Ofsted inspector, how did you prepare for an inspection?
Well, when you were, if you were a lead inspector as a non-contracted OI, you would be told of your inspection. Let me see if I can remember this correctly. You'd be told you were going to do an inspection about 3 or 4 weeks before. You would be told where it was and when it was. You kept all that secret, obviously. And then you went into all of the information about the school you could possibly gather, both. And in the framework I was inspecting under, you went to all the data on the schools, the progress of the pupils. I never inspected under the inspection framework that prioritised attainment. So you looked at all the data on progress, you looked at all the data on attendance, you looked at all the data on behaviour, which is amounts to the same thing. Attendance and behaviour tend to come under the same thing. And then you looked at all of the previous inspection reports, all the monitoring reports, if there were any. Every single, it is a mammoth. And I don't say this with any expectation of sympathy. It is an absolutely mammoth. And then your preparation is then inspected by your quality assurer to make sure that you've covered all the bases. And then you submit your pre-inspection notes to both your team. That would be usually the day before, and your line manager, essentially your quality assurer, would then also see your notes. And if you'd missed something glaring, they would tell you, and that's how you would prepare.
We do have some listener feedback. As always, if you ever want to kind of comment on what we're talking about, you can email us at beyondmailbag@twinkle.co.uk. And don't forget, the twinkle has no E. So this one comes from a maths teacher whose first name is A. My experiences with Ofsted led me to the conclusion that they arrive with a decision largely made based on the data and then look to fit the report to that. Lesson feedback from my observations was often so far removed from my own analysis of my lessons that I cynically arrived at the conclusion that, save me doing something outrageous, my teaching was largely irrelevant to the feedback I received. As I read that, I could just see Graham just shaking his head.
Yeah, shaking his
It
head,
really
yeah.
isn't. I used to think that as well when I was a head teacher and middle leader and whatever. That's exactly what I thought. What I thought. But the quality assurance frameworks around what you do are, and in fact, I'll not be too betraying too much of a confidence if I say this, that when on one inspection I was on as a team inspector without a leadership role, I remember saying at the start of the inspection to the lead inspector in our team meeting before the day started, I said, well, how do you want this to go? And I was within a hair's breadth of being kicked off the team there and then.
Wow.
It was really taken seriously that you must not prejudge. And because one of the things is that all the documentation you produce and all of the analysis you do are all public documents. So that from the minute you're told you're going to inspect school A, for example, you then start doing your analysis, and everything you write down about the school, your early thoughts, your early notes, your analysis, your comparative work, everything you do is public.
Yeah.
So, and stored away and fine. Now it's all electronic, but it was all on paperwork when I did it and became electronic during the latter years of my inspection, and can be summoned under under freedom of information by anybody with a genuine interest in that school, be it a teacher. You can go back during any inspection and say to Ofsted, I'd like to see every prep that inspector did before they came to my school. So, and you can get it and you can have a look at it. And if you want to, you can use that as a means of challenging the inspection to say, look, he's written here, this school is likely to be X, Y, or other. Or, gosh, this feels like inadequate to me. Or because for precisely that reason, because there are occasionally inspections that are challenged legitimately because inspectors are on a bell curve as well. There are those who are, but they're let go. I have to tell you, and I don't expect any sympathy for this whatsoever. No, neither should there be, because it's the most responsible job in schools and people's lives. Inspectors are regularly let go. I mean by that, fired. Because they do precisely that, or they copy inspection reports from previous inspections, or do something, how can I put this? The quality assurance, I keep going on about it, but every step of your inspection, right through to your writing the report, in fact, more so at the writing the report end, you've got somebody on your shoulder the entire time. Even when you're HMI, you've got a senior HMI, your line manager, who looks at what you do, looks at your early drafts. Then when you write the report, for example, that goes off to your first quality assurer. They look at it and look at every single sentence you write and say, where's the evidence? Because you have to send all the evidence off to your quality assurer with those used to be called the F forms, the evidence forms, the things that inspectors scribble on during the time they're there. And your report would always be sent back with, have you got enough on this? Did you mean this word or this word? Because the evidence you've got doesn't really support what you've just said. So do you mean that? Or do you mean something else? What do you mean? Because the evidence doesn't support it. The evidence doesn't support it. And then you'd have to justify it to your QA. Essentially, it's a mini trial, because inspectors, an inspection can, quite rightly, be challenged in court right up to judicial review, and have been successfully challenged. If an inspection is successfully challenged, Ofsted are quite rightly shaking to the core of their foundations, because it means their credibility. Every inspection rests on the credibility of every other. And very occasionally inspections are overturned. It's not often, and I would maintain, because the inspections are very tightly overseen. And that is, I have to say, partly why in the end I thought, do I want to keep doing this? Because it is the work involved is, and rightly so, massive.
It's reassuring, though, to know that there are those safeguards for every
I
single
thought so.
inspection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
That's
I used to get inspection judgments. And I've worked in schools at one level or another, in schools in every category. And to be taught, I remember taking over a school in Coventry as the head teacher there, and it was in serious weaknesses. And the first inspection, it kept it in serious weaknesses. Oh, God, I was devastated. Absolutely devastated. And I really did think, as our friend has just said, she came knowing that. She looked at the data and knew that. And we pled with her, begged with her, and she said, but look, this is what I found on site. This is what I found on site. I don't care what I want you to say, I don't care, but she said, yeah, it's all very well what you're showing about the improvement trends here and the improvement trends here. But when I came into the school and saw what was going on in books and saw what was going on in the classrooms, it doesn't support the judgment of satisfactory in those days. RI now. And she was right. Now I can see she was right, but it doesn't feel like it.
What's on your mind? Let us know your thoughts, ideas and anecdotes. Drop us a line at beyondmailbag@twinkle.co.uk.
The single word judgment, has become a hot potato now, hasn't it? Because of what has happened to people.
Of course.
And Amanda Spielman's just come out, hasn't she, to say that she thinks, and I have to say, I agree with her, that technically there are no single word judgments apart from outstanding and good. All the others are two words, but I know what she means. I think they have to stay. I'm a signed up. Well, I believe Bridget Phillipson's doing a sensational job, and I think she'd be a much better Secretary of State than any of the Tory secrets that we've had. They've all been profoundly awful. But personal view. But I think Amanda's right. That as a parent, also, I do value it. And I regret. Well, let me try and do this as neutrally as I can. There are schools that have become out that were outstanding, say 10 years ago, that then by law couldn't be inspected and fell very, very quickly. And well, I'll say no more about that because I have personal experience as a parent of that. But most parents, if I'm totally honest with you, including myself, we don't read the reports in full. Now they're very dramatically changed to make them quicker and easier to read. And I do think that's potentially not helpful. I can say this, but as a parent now, not having a child who's going through the system anymore while she's in post 16, but the reports I used to write at the latter end, they're now about 2 pages long or something. They used to be 4. They used to be 25 when I was in school in Leamington. They were enormous. And every department was inspected. Every department got their own page. And as a head of department, that's all you read. But now they're 2 pages long, and I would say that's a backward step because they're so bland.
Yeah.
They're almost useless, in my humble opinion. But they used to be, they used to have their 4 sections, and each section was terribly detailed and will give examples of practice, and that was just sensationally useful as a head teacher, because you go through that line by. I don't know what our teachers do with the new inspection reports. I really don't. But as a parent, you simply haven't got time, have you? In a busy day, even as the most caring parent.
Yeah.
So I know why they're doing it, because I don't think parents were having the time to read a 10-page if it was 10 pages, including the documentation at the back and how many days were inspected and all the rest of it. Haven't got time. I remember a school in Birmingham I was privileged to be the lead inspector on this. And the head teacher was coming to the end of her career, and she'd worked in the same school for about 20 years or something as a head teacher, and she'd really given her life to it. And she and her staff, no head teacher turns the school around. Genuinely is the entire community. And if a head teacher claims to turn the school around, they should not be trusted and avoided. But she'd given her life to it selflessly, and it was the children from the most, you know what I'm talking about, by the most hideous obstacles to any kind of, and the parents had no evidence that school worked at all. So why on earth should they urge their children to attend? And yet the outcomes for those children in terms of their happiness, their joy, their curiosity, their passion for life, their optimism about the future, you know, it was just a total honor to be and to give that school outstanding. And I don't think, you see, the effect of that on every single person associated with that school is the converse of what we are now most frightened by, where on the very rare occasions.
I really wish our listeners could see your face, because just the kind of like, you just look so proud and so privileged to be a part of this. It's just genuinely.
You are. I can recall a school. This was not a PRU. It was a alternative provision unit, where it was the best. I never even saw these as a head teacher, because on the very rare occasions I had to permanently exclude a child, and then they became the local authority responsibility if the appeal was, if it didn't go to appeal. They would then, it would then be an alternative provision of some sort if they couldn't locate them in a school. Well, I had no reason to really go and visit any of these alternative provision settings, and often they're private schools, often they're independent, I should say, because local authorities don't have the money. They just haven't got the money to run a very effective alternative provision site or PRU. And some of the best practice I ever saw was in those schools. Just phenomenal curriculum for life, you know, where the children were experiencing days where they would learn, they'd be doing their GCSEs in mathematics and history and geography and all the full curriculum, but also they'd be looking after the land, they'd be feeding their animals and making sure that they were, that they had a passion for life in that respect. They'd be mending cars, they'd be painting their school. Stunning. And I used to come away from those schools, and I was lucky enough to be able to give outstanding to a few of those. The converse, of course, was that there were schools where, for one reason or another, I've got to be careful what I say, but it'd been let go, and nobody really cared. And particularly in these days where academies are, what can I say, because there is a significant degree of financial pressure on the proprietors of some schools in the independent sector and academies in the state sector, it can easily go awry, is what I would say. It can easily go awry, and the money can end up in completely the wrong place. God forbid, I'm sure this never happens, but God forbid it should ever be the case that you drive into a school of a big academy and you see the, massive great cars belonging to the Academy Trust board, and the the teacher who teaches 22 hours out of 25 mathematics, the exhaust falling off, and and she has to park next to this massive great Land Cruiser that belongs to somebody, and you do now. It sounds like special pleading, but in Ofsted is there to back the children, but also to say this doesn't look right. And you don't. I would say that if conversely to the popular view, and I don't mind being unpopular because it's my view, I think inspection should be broadened. I think there should be a real emphasis on the way in which academy trusts lead their group, and they don't get it. I don't think they get it. They get audited, of course. They get audited, and that's quite right. They've got their public money being given to them, but it's their schools that get inspected, and therefore by proxy, the academy board will receive praise or criticism. But there are often cases, sadly, where in poorly run academies, and there are a few, because a normal bell curve of human experience dictates this, where a school will receive a negative judgment, and the head teacher will suffer the wrath of the academy board, who will come down and say, because inspections never fire anybody.
No.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to say you should lose your job. You're not allowed to say this school should be closed. The pressure can often, where it's poorly applied, come from the governing body or the academy trust, who put the head under so much pressure. You're now not even allowed as an inspector to say, well, your exam results aren't very good, and they weren't very good last year. Or you can close an inspection down as a head teacher or as a head of department by saying, oh, an inspector's just been to see me to say, can I see your mock exam results for the last 2 years? Or can I see your test results for this class for the last term? You ask that as an inspector, and the inspection is torpedoed there and then. Every head teacher knows this about the data because it's in the schedule now. You're not allowed to even mention it in the report. You can't say pupil progress is over the past 2 years has been X, or the result of the pupil progress within the school as judged by the data we've seen in the school. It's all now, as it has been for a while in independent school inspections, wholly on quality of education. What I would do is I would not take Ofsted away. I wouldn't change it much if I were, Secretary of State. I really wouldn't. But I would beef up local authorities, and I'd say, because that's just gone to the wall, in my view. I think I'd take a serious look at how academies are. Some of them are terrific. Obviously, they really are pupil-centred. But I really look at how they're formatively assisting the development of practice, because that's what local authorities used to do when they were, they used to have advisors for every subject. And if they were great, they'd come in, they'd work with you, and they'd develop projects in the authority, sharing good practice all around it. That still happens to an extent, but only now for those areas that are statutorily required, like EAL or special education needs, mainstream teaching is left to the devices of the school. Well, if you've got a stressed and worried school that hasn't got the money to go training people, and no school has anymore, who's training you? Who's improving your practice? All you've got, as this is, my perception as a teacher, is, oh God, the only thing that happens to me is I get inspected, told off, and away they go again. Of course, it isn't always like that, because most schools, I think it's 75% or something, 80% even in primary, are good or better. So the inspection experience, while stressful, usually ends up pretty well.
Graham, this is some listener feedback from a film studies teacher. They say, the funny thing is that I found my brushes with Ofsted less damaging than my experiences of schools trying to anticipate Ofsted behaviour. One school that I worked for ran a mock Ofsted week during which a visiting head teacher observed one of my lessons and graded it as inadequate, beginning a chain of consequences that ended up with me on an action plan and then being ejected from the school 4 months later. The odd thing was that I wasn't a bad teacher. I'd admit the lesson I ran in the first instance was the wrong one to run, but such was the hysteria around an imminent visit from the dreaded inspectors that the school was driven to taking rash decisions that I expect they regretted in the end. I have to say, I've had a similar experience in terms of the constant mock Ofsteds that were running on a cycle within the school were far more stressful than the real thing. Far more.
I agree. And I'm guilty of it myself. In the early days of my head teachership, and it was a school it was a school in the category of concern when I went there, I thought that would be a tremendous idea, because I'm friends of mine, head teacher friends of mine in Birmingham, where the schools had achieved very significant and positive change, they'd done it. So I said to my leadership team, why don't we, this horrible, nauseating word, Mocksted, and there's nothing funny about that at all. It is just dire. And I used to say to my leadership, let's do it. And only when you've done it once do you find, oh my goodness, that was horrible. and completely counterproductive. If you are, I think, as a half decent, we'd say to ourselves as a leadership team, what have we just discovered? Nothing we didn't know before. Yeah, of course, the science teaching isn't very good, but there's only one science teacher and 4 of them are supplies, and they're doing the best they can. But what can we expect? All you're doing is making people completely miserable. So, but now you see, one of the interesting things about training as an inspector was that we used to be told by our line managers, if you find a school has done mock steads, you've really got to ask questions about leadership.
Yeah.
Just going to say there's a whole section now, certainly was when I was inspecting, in the leadership category that says, how well are the staff being led? And you wouldn't put school into special measures for this because you wouldn't and shouldn't and couldn't use a single episode of poor management. But if there was a pattern where the teachers were just being under the cosh the whole time. One of the interesting things I used to find was that you'd have a staff questionnaire, as and the staff would be invited to give their views about the school. They were incredible. Because, of course, the staff would say, because they were anonymous, exactly what they wanted. And you get them back and sift them through. And sometimes they were excoriating about the leadership of the school.
I can imagine.
Yeah. I was always very, very to the point because, the school that I most recently had Ofsted in, that school needed to fail. So much was wrong with that school. The kids were being let down. They weren't getting the grades they needed. Ofsted needed to come in and change it. And it ended up being academised, whether you think that's right or wrong. Those kids are getting better grades. Those kids have got better behaviour management now.
Yeah.
And it was just, I got that, and I wrote a full-blown essay in my survey because I was like, they need to know
the truth.
how bad it is.
But on the other hand, it was very interesting to in one school, I won't name it, there was an occasion where it was quite clear from the staff questionnaires that we were getting in that the head teacher was being bullied.
Oh, interesting.
And the staff had quite clearly, they hated her. I won't say very much more, but there was it was not, well, anyway, the point is the views of the staff in the inspection about what's being done to them, I don't think this is widely appreciated. So if a school is experiencing, and this can often be, you've got to be, well, now it's easy for me to say, isn't it? But, head teachers are under terrible pressure themselves too. So that's why they feel themselves driven to, but if they can be braver and say, oh God, we don't need to add to what do we most need to do? And I know it's easy to say this, isn't it, as a head, but I say to myself, okay, what do I really want here? What do I really want in the school? What I really want is for every single person, be it child or adult, at some point during today to say to themselves, I didn't know I could do that.
Yeah.
Really simple. I didn't know I could do that. To be surprised.
Yeah.
If they can be surprised, C.S. Lewis, you can be surprised by joy. If they can be surprised, or what I really want as a head teacher, and what I really want is for at some stage on this site, for every single adult or child to be curious.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I want.
Yeah.
We're not going to launch SpaceX. I haven't got the money. I haven't got the resources. And frankly, none of us are that brilliant. We're ordinary people.
Yeah.
But if we can make a child curious about what we're teaching. So, and then I firmly believe, that's much more likely to lead to a better school environment.
I agree, totally.
I want to say one thing about, if I may say something about this pressure business again, because you used a very interesting word there, Jodie, in your last comment, and this word fail. Now, what's interesting about, the kind of cartooning of education in circles that are outside the profession, I'm talking now about the press, is that word, that's the only time that word is used. Never happens in Ofsted. You never say the school has failed. You never say that never appears anywhere in the inspection schedule. There's no such word as fail. It doesn't appear. You can say a school requires special measures. You can say a school is in serious weaknesses, or has serious weaknesses rather, but you can't say fail because, quite rightly, it's a stupid word to use. But you see it in the press and you feel it. And if a school is placed in category, the press, the first thing, am I having a go at the press? Kind of, but they need to sell things, I suppose, but you will then hear it. School failed by, useless head teacher or something. So Ofsted fails certain school. Now, how do you control that? You can't, because it's a free press. Same with the exam results. I used to be more terrified as a head by the exam results than I was by Ofsted. Much more terrified. And that is, if I'm totally honest, one of the reasons why I stopped being head teacher, because every single summer.
Yeah, you were on a cliff edge.
And that wasn't because of inspection. I knew I could cope with that, knew how to do that. That was okay because I'd been trained in it. But if you've got some idiot in the news press saying, oh, your results are 2% down, therefore this school is horrendous, this is a terrible school, you lose your kids. Lose your kids, lose your staff.
It's your own time you're wasting. Ramblings from beyond the classroom with Marie and Jodie. There's not a lot they don't know about teaching.
Oh, I could talk to you for all day.
Yeah, me
I think
too.
we do need to wrap it up there. Thank you so much
Thanks,
for joining
Graham.
us.
Pleasure.
That was really
Pleasure.
interesting.
We like to kind of wrap up our episodes with 2 stars and a wish. So we like a little positivity and something that we
That you
make
wish
Ofsted
for.
better. Do either of you have a wish to start with? A star to start with.
I have a star in that I like the fact that Graham, when talking about Ofsted, keeps mentioning that it is child focused.
Yeah.
Because I think as teachers, we very often feel it is teacher focused, that it is all about us and our performance. And it's actually quite reassuring to hear that that's not where the emphasis is. I mean, obviously that links into it, but that's not where the emphasis is. Because the feeling I got was if you didn't teach in a certain way, following these 10 rules that senior management have given you're not going to do very well. Whereas my approach to teaching was more reading the room and seeing where the kids were on that day and then adjusting things accordingly. And that ended up not working for me in the end. So I think that's really good that has not actually come from Ofsted. That's probably come from senior leaders in schools.
Mine's kind of similar. My star is kind of, I have to say this conversation has changed my view of Ofsted being like the big bad wolf to actually senior leaders being the bad wolf. And actually what teachers and Ofsted inspectors, or at least what Graham wants, is what's right for the students and what's right for those kids.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, kind of no one becomes an Ofsted inspector to put the fear of God into you.
No.
They do it because they want education to be better. And I don't think any school can say that their school is perfect and their education is perfect. Yeah. So Ofsted is to make sure that it's not letting down kids and it's not letting down the people that are in that school. And maybe it's not perfect because nothing is. But I think going in with that mindset of actually what we want is the same thing. Yeah. We want what's right for these people in front of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything you'd like to add, Graham? Or
I think one of the things I must say is what a sensational thing you're doing here is, if I may say that. It sounds terribly patronising, but
thank you.
What a lovely forum, and the people you've got people who are commenting and joining you. Because my wish would be collaboration and more than anything else. That if the emphasis I think it will come back because all these things are cyclical. At some point, some bright spark in the DFE will say, why don't we centralise some of these ridiculous things that schools are doing on their own about ordering this and ordering that and making sure that the engines work and we've got a contract for this. Why don't we do the procurement I don't know, on a local authority level, which would mean that schools have got more money to spend on training and more money to spend on getting more adults in the classroom.
Yeah.
Because the most valuable thing of all for me as a teacher was time. More than any other. And if I've got time, I can enjoy my work. And if I can enjoy my work, the pupils are going to be happier, just the way it works.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So if I'm spending my time, comparing tire manufacturers for the minibus, well, that's less time I've got to think, how can I start a lesson brilliantly?
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd agree with
you. Doesn't fit entirely into the thing, but that's what I'd have wished. Collaboration and therefore time.
I think I agree. I think collaboration awareness, because this has completely changed my mindset, and a mindset that I've had I'm young enough to have had Ofsted inspections as a kid, and I remember being a student when the school was inspected. In one case, it was the last time it was inspected. But it won't be for long, I'm sure. But it's just collaboration, awareness of what the point is.
Yeah, my wish would be that we do some myth busting about Ofsted. I think there are a lot of myths that have been handed down from teacher to teacher and from senior teachers. No, you need to do this and you need to do that. Like you need to have a seating plan and it needs to say who's pupil premium, who's on free school meals. You need to justify why you've sat X next to Y. And when Ofsted come in, I've always found they're not interested in looking at any of that.
Not allowed to ask for it.
And you might have spent hours.
Not allowed to ask for it.
So I think
you're not allowed to.
And if you ask for it as an inspector, if you go into into your classroom and say, "Can I see your seating plan?" or worse these days, "Can I see your plan for the lesson?" or "Can I see your data?"
Yeah.
You ask for any one of those three things, and the inspection is at risk of failing.
See,
the amount of seating plans I've pointlessly done.
If you've got a seating plan and you use it as part of your regular stuff, you might want to say to an inspector, "I do this," but even so, an inspector will say, "There's no need to show." Nowadays, didn't used to be, of course, but in the last 4 or 5 years, when the schedule changed as a result of working with the unions, actually, the 25 list to 25 jobs that teachers were supposed not to do, that's taken dramatically seriously by inspectors. You are expected to know those as inspector. What are teachers not required to do anymore? The assessment paperwork and the data collection, all of those things. None of that is supposed to do. Are you supposed to do anymore? And even marking is now. You can't go into a classroom as an inspector and look at pupils' books and say, "Aha, these haven't been marked." Not that one would ever do that, but that's part of the myth.
What?
It doesn't matter whether you mark it or not. Are the children making progress? Are they enjoying their learning? If you can kill a child's enjoyment and curiosity and passion for learning by marking a book. But if you've got a system that works where you've got kids coming up to you saying, mini tutorials during the lesson, they're coming up for 5 minutes, a whole 30 of them during one lesson, and you're having a chat with them, and haven't written the darn thing in the book. So what? Who cares? And inspectors are not allowed to say, "Just a minute, there's nothing in this book." So what? So there is. You're right. The myth busting is terribly important. I'm not blaming anybody for that. It's a whole system thing, isn't it? And exactly what you're doing here. It's easy, isn't it? Because I'm not being inspected, but there is much less to be frightened of than people think. And going back full circle, though, that sounds like I'm being terribly trite about our poor friend who took her life. The pressure she was under is Shakespearean, is catastrophic.
And I really genuinely hope for those people who are listening that this has reduced your stress and reduced anxiety about it, because
me too.
That's a huge thing. But it's really important to just say it is still stressful. Where that stress comes from, whether that stress should be there or not, is kind of irrelevant. It's a really stressful time for most people. And please, please, please talk to your colleagues or your friends or your family, or reach out to some external support. All our thoughts are with Ruth Perry and her family.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
This podcast is proudly produced by Beyond. Please bear in mind the views and opinions expressed are those of individuals and may not represent those of Beyond or Twinkle.